Good morning. How you all doing? Well, I'm glad. Boy, we had a storm, didn't we? Whew. People in the southeast sure got trouble. You know somebody's got problems over there, you let us know, okay? Anybody needs a little help, let us know. We can do what we can. Sure did a lot of damage. This morning, I want my clicker to work. Oh, there it went. Let me back up one. Whoops, it come back again. Okay, let's try that. I'd like to talk a little bit about discouragement and depression. I was watching TV the other day, and they was having several shows on talking about discouragement and depression. And the number of people in our culture that's experiencing these problems right now is really high. I guess it's at an all-time high according to what they were saying on television. And that got my attention when they were saying that because it's a horrible thing to have to deal with, either one, discouragement, and of course, if it gets worse, depression. But one of the questions that comes to our minds as Christian people is it a sin for us to be discouraged or depressed? I don't know if you've ever wondered that before. If you've ever been discouraged, you probably wondered it, because Christians have faith in God, and our confidence is in God, and we expect tomorrow to be a better day than today. Well, what does that say for us if we're feeling discouraged, down in the dumps, or we're suffering from a bout of depression? Does that mean we're not as faithful as we ought to be? Is there something wrong with our spiritual life? Our confidence weak? What exactly are we to glean from this? I think it's a natural reaction that a lot of people have, but I want to study the answer with you and find out just exactly where we stand in this matter. Our Lord was discouraged at times. That's something we don't think about very often. We think about Jesus as the great teacher to the masses, or doing the miracles that he performed, feeding multitudes of people. But Jesus, you know, he was a man. He was just like you and I. He was also God, but he was also man. And as a man, he experienced all the temptations that we experience. The sufferings, the troubles, they all came his way. Yeah, he understands what we go through. But when you look at his life, you're going to find out that there were several times when our Lord was very discouraged. I can't go through all of them, but let me just cite you one. In John chapter 6, Jesus, he was very popular at that time in his ministry. Thousands of people from all around Galilee had come to Capernaum to listen to the Master teach. And a lot of these people, they actually followed him all the way around the Sea of Galilee, wanting to hear what he had to say. I mean, the multitudes were horrendous, so much so that on one occasion he actually had to get into a boat and push out into the water so that the people couldn't get to him. It was very difficult for him to stand there and teach, because people wanted to touch him, this prophet that came from God. So it was during one of the highlights of his ministry. His apostles, of course, they were very excited. This is what they had worked so hard for. This is what they were longing for, was for Jesus' message to catch on, for his organization or whatever they were looking for. It would grow and become larger, and they would all become boards of directors or something of that nature as the kingdom tended to grow. So it was a good time. It was a good time in Galilee for these Jewish men, for what they were looking for. But things weren't exactly the way they appeared to be. The crowd had become so large that the Lord, on this occasion, decided to preach a sermon he apparently hadn't preached before. And that was the fact that he was the bread of life. In John chapter 6, he declared himself in the wilderness in Moses' day. They were fed miraculously manna that fell from heaven. And what Jesus is teaching the people in John chapter 6, that in the New Testament here, he's the manna that fell from heaven. And as living bread, the people were to consume him, drink his blood, and eat his body. And when he said that, the people were startled by what he had to say. John said, from that time, many of his disciples went back, and they walked with him no more. They heard something from the preacher they didn't like at all, and they just turned around and abandoned him. And he turned to his apostles and he said, do you also want to go away? Now, in the Greek, if you use the present tense and you translate it literally, it's going to come out like this. You won't leave me too, will you? What did he feel like? I know what he said. What did he feel like? What does the question make you think he must have felt like when he watched what was happening right in front of his face? And then the question, of course, what would his apostles do? Would they abandon him also? Remember, he's just a man. And as a man, he feels the ups and downs in life all like the rest of us. Some 700 years before this time, the prophet Isaiah, he was able to know the thoughts that would go through Jesus' mind when Jesus came into the world. And he uttered many of those thoughts as to what the Messiah would have to go through. And Isaiah said in chapter 49 and verse 4 that in the mind of Christ, he thinks, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for nothing and in vain. Do you reckon this is one of those occasions where Jesus had that thought go through his mind? When he watched these disciples turn around and walk away, did he feel like he had labored in vain? That his work had been for naught? How depressed must he have been that day? I think it was only one of many days when the Son of God was depressed. On the cross, he cried out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What did he feel in his heart for humanity as they rejected him? The apostles were discouraged on occasion as well. There was two traveling on the highway to Emmaus, and they met the Lord, but they didn't recognize who he was. And he engaged in a conversation. They were down in the dumps. And basically, he wanted to know why. And they explained to him who the Messiah was and the fact that he had been murdered. That very day, or 2 days earlier, he had been murdered. Their hopes had gone up in smoke. And they said, we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. We were hoping. On Friday, we were hoping that Jesus is the one who's going to redeem Israel. On Sunday, they're not hoping that anymore. That was something they left behind on Friday. We were hoping, but not now. Now our hopes have gone up in smoke. These men, some 3 years earlier, had abandoned their careers, spent a lot of time away from their family, and traveled around the countryside of Judea and Galilee trying to establish this man's kingdom, trying to help him become a popular person, where many people would follow. And it worked. They were growing in leaps and in bounds. And then suddenly, pow, he's gone. What's wrong with you fellas? We were hoping that he was Messiah, but not anymore. They were sad. Paul faced an impossible mission. As a Jew, he was to live by the law of Moses, and he tried. I can't think of anybody that would have tried harder to do right than Paul the Apostle. When we look at him as an apostle of Christ, his life was absolutely incredible. This man went through everything, trying to be faithful to his Lord and Master. Well, it was the same man who was the Pharisee of earlier days. And as a Pharisee, I can just imagine that Paul, with all of his might, tried to live according to the law of God. He tried to do everything that God would want him to do. He wanted to do right. But you know how that goes. No matter how hard you try, sometimes you miss the mark. You don't want to do wrong, but once in a while you do. And you don't even know why you did it sometimes. Sometimes we can't even believe we did it. I've done that so many times before. How dumb am I to do this again? What's wrong with me? Ever feel that way? About once a week? Well, Paul felt that way too. O wretched man that I am, who would deliver me from this body of death? I honestly can't think of a soul that would have struggled more to do right than Paul the Apostle, or Paul the Pharisee, I should say. And yet, he still felt like a loser. He became discouraged because of his own imperfections. You see, my point is this, and there are many other Bible characters I could go to. Judas Iscariot, when he went out and he hung himself. Or how about King Saul? How about Job? Job was a man who was eat up with discouragement. Job was God's man on earth. God said himself, there's no man like Job. Bang. He's a one-of-a-kind kind of a man. He was God's chosen. And Satan wanted to bring him down, and he tried very hard. But no matter what Satan did, he took his children, he took his land, he took his crops, he took his servants. Bang, bang, bang. Job lost everything he had. He even lost the support of his wife. Why don't you denounce God and die and get it over with? But he did not stumble in any way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but he didn't. And then along came his three buddies, great friends, close friends, loved him like a brother. And they came, they found Job, and they sat down with him for 7 days. 7 days, that's important. They sat there in complete silence. You know what 7 days was? That was the period of mourning for a dead man. When they saw Job, they knew he was a dead man. And for 7 days, they sat in silence, believing there was no hope for this man. And it was at that time, recorded in the 3rd chapter of the book of Job, I believe it's verse 3, that Job cried out, I wished I had never been born. After everything that man went through, and then when his three buddies basically were turning their back on him, that pushed him over the edge, and he went into a state of depression. And he stayed that way for some time, months afterwards. How did that happen? Job never knew. Only that it did happen. How fast can life turn up on its ear? Throughout the Bible, there are many, many, many characters that suffered from both discouragement and some depression. Some committed suicide, like Saul and Judas Iscariot. Depression was so bad they killed themselves, which isn't so uncommon, is it? Does that mean that we're not good people as Christians? No, it does not. Better men than me have suffered with discouragement. I don't like it, but I don't feel like a loser just because I experienced such things. What is discouragement? Brother Wayne Jackson defines discouragement and depression, and I think his definition is spot on. Discouragement, a temporary feeling of disappointment or disheartenment resulting from disadvantageous turn of events, whether physical, material, social, emotional, or spiritual. A lot of things can go wrong and cause us to be discouraged, or sometimes just the anticipation of something going wrong. But discouragement is generally a temporary thing. It passes shortly. Depression, on the other hand, is discouragement plus, you might say. For a protracted period of despondency that greatly curtails or maybe destroys one's ability to function as a healthy and happy person. Sometimes we become so depressed we can't function. We can't think right. We can't reason right. Our behavior can be greatly altered. We're not ourselves. So what a way. It's a horrible way to live. Horrible way to have to live. And so many people in our culture suffer from this. Sometimes our brothers and sisters suffer from this. And it pains me so to think of all my good friends who may be inside themselves a little too much. The causes of depression can be classified under a number of different headings. Physical injury or illness, I got a little insight into that one. And sometimes when you get to where you can't do what you used to do, you get depressed. Confined to home, confined to a certain spot. Same thing day after day after day after day after day after day. And so it goes. And you become depressed sometimes. Down the dumps, you get to wondering, what in the world is this all about? I don't like this anymore. I'm not having fun. It's very hard to have your life flip like a switch. Sometimes a person's on their feet one day and in a wheelchair the next day. Life will never be the same. And they go through bouts of discouragement. It's almost certain. Sometimes depression kicks in. Another reason people suffer is financial disaster. Oh man, how many things can go wrong? A house burned down and it just so happens you was in between insurances. Oh, you lose your job, you can't pay your bills. Oh, there are so many things that can go wrong with our finances, and it just tears our world apart. It is such a big, momentous thing. We have to keep in mind what Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 6. We brought nothing into this world, and be careful and remember, it is certain we can carry nothing out. No matter what we have, as precious as it may be, it's only temporary. It's only on loan. We're going to give it up. Maybe today, maybe 20 years from now, but we're going to give it up. Don't think of anything as being yours, because really it's not. It's not. And if you have food and you have clothing, if you're covered in the dry, warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and plenty of food for your belly, be happy. Be happy. That's what it takes to live. The brand new car, it doesn't take that to survive. The food, the shelter, the clothing. If you got that, you're a very fortunate person. Think on the important things, not just the bright and shiny things. Number 3, lost love. I'm talking about thinking you found the right person, only to find out the right person wasn't right after all. I've seen this a lot during my life. It's not a marriage dissolve, but a relationship dissolve. People become very much in love sometimes, assuming that the other person is very much in love also, only to find out that that's not what happened. The love was one-sided. And the person you thought surely you would marry, they are gone one day. They've turned to someone else, perhaps, and you're left alone. And people become depressed. Females are generally more given to that, I think, than males, though it does happen to males. But I think females read the tea leaves more than men do. Men are always, well, I shouldn't say always, but men tend to believe that this can't be real. Nobody can love me. I got hairy legs or something, something's wrong here. I'm in over my head. Women, they don't see things that way so much. Anyway, it causes a lot of suffering. Death of a loved one. Nothing's ever altered my life like the death of a loved one. My first great experience was the death of my mother. I felt like I was frozen in time when she died. It was the most incredible experience I had ever had. The fact that she was there and couldn't move troubled me something terrible. It took me a while to get over that. I should say get beyond that. But imagine if it was the death of a spouse or the death of a child. People go through all sorts of pain that most of us maybe have never had to experience yet. Thank God we haven't had to. But some do, some have. And they have to live with so many precious memories. And those precious memories can be very hard sometimes because of what in our mind should be, would be, and they are sad, sometimes become very sad. Why am I saying this? We need to think about what people go through. I don't have to go through that, and I thank God every day I don't. But I know people who do have to go through that. And when we do, we need to reach out and love them. We need to be kind to them. They need to know that we know they're there and that we care so very much for their souls. We should never let anybody be alone with their thoughts. It only takes a moment to be a hero. Strive to be a hero. In 2 Samuel 12:23, I think of this always. When King David's infant son died, he stopped mourning as he had been doing during his prayers for the child. And his advisors asked, why? Why have you quit mourning now? The child's gone. And David responded, he's dead. Why should I fast? He's dead. What good would it do to fast? Can I bring him back? And the rhetorical question, the answer is obviously no, he can't. I shall go to him. I shall go to him in the other world. But he can't come back to me. That's not the way it works. I think of this every day. Our separation from all those people we love, it's just temporary. It's just temporary. It's not going to be long. We're going to see him again. We'll be with him again. We get to talk to him. We get to love him again. All we have to do is hold on, hang on, and wait for the better day that's coming. Our God is a gracious person. Sin and guilt from past mistakes, they cause us to suffer a great deal. Do you ever think about things you did before you became a Christian and you can't believe you did it? Boy, I do. I can't believe I was that kind of a person. Sometimes I can't believe I was that big of an idiot. There was things I've done in my life that I don't want to remember. I hate to have it brought up to me. And even when I think about it within myself, it makes me feel ashamed. Even now, I still feel ashamed. I feel the guilt. I feel my unworthiness. I feel my sorriness. And I got to wonder, how can God love me? Such an unlovable person, how could God love me? But we're taught and we believe that he does, even though we can't see it for ourselves. In Psalm 6, verses 2 through 7, have mercy on me, the psalmist cried out, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are troubled. My soul also is greatly troubled. I quake within myself. I am weary with my groaning. All night I make my bed swim with all the tears. I drench my couch with my tears. My eyes waste away because of grief. It grows old because of all my enemies. The psalmist was discouraged by himself. And sometimes we do too. And when I think about the amazing love of God, I just can't get my mind around it. But I know enough to trust God, and I do. I've got another section I'd love to teach you about, but I think you'll probably throw a songbook at me if I start it. So I'm going to end it here, and I really, really, really hate to do that, but I'm going to because I'm nice and I love you. Perhaps you experience discouragement or depression, especially now we're coming up on the holidays. Always a popular time of year for such things to happen. There are things that you can do to protect yourself. But I'll tell you first and foremost, that's what my next section was all about. Learn to trust God. You trust God. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I know he doesn't lie. And I know what God has promised. And I hold on to that promise with all my strength. It's like a preserver in the ocean. I wrap my arm around it and I'm not going to turn loose. Because it keeps me afloat. It can keep you afloat as well. Another thing to do to help yourself to deal with depression or discouragement is to reach out and help others. If you want purpose in your life, make it your purpose to be a buoy to those around you whom you love. Don't wait for an invitation. It won't come. You have to make the first step. Make it your mission, your purpose to make sure that this person is surviving and doing so with a good attitude. Give them your love, your affection, because they need something to hold on to. Because so many times, so much has been taken away from them. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. And you'll be a giant. If you're not a Christian, you are to believe Jesus Christ is God's Son, who died for your sins and all other people. You are to believe him, trust him. Resolve in your heart that I'm going to stop sinning. I'm going to work on it with all my might. Be willing to talk about Jesus. Be immersed in water to have your sins removed. And then as a Christian, give your life purpose, the purpose of Christ. Search, seek, and save everyone you can. That's the most noble thing I think we can achieve in our life is being a sacrifice for others. If you need God's forgiveness, maybe just God's help or strength, and you need our prayers,